hunting, self-defense, war, revolt, liberty. Today I'm going to inform you on the guns that have been used throughout American history. If you already know a lot about guns, this speech is going to give you more information about how they have been used specifically in American history. Even if you have no interest in firearms, it's important to understand how they have helped to form modern America, because that has most likely had a big effect on you. Personally, I've always cared a lot about guns and I found them very interesting, but particularly their use throughout American history. In preparation for this speech, I have borrowed information from books, articles, and first-hand experiences to give me more info on this topic. So today I'm going to talk about the 1700s, 1800s, and the 1900s, and the guns that have been used throughout those eras. Let's begin. So first, the 1700s. So the first rifle I'm going to talk about here is the Kentucky Long Rifle. It was invented in 1730 by both Swedish and German immigrants. It was a quite revolutionary rifle because it now included a new design compared to other rifles. It now had a much longer barrel, and it had a rifle barrel, meaning it had little grooves on the inside spinning in a circle, which helped the bullet to maintain its velocity and its speed for much longer. And so this was really significant at the time because it allowed soldiers to shoot over 200 yards with this rifle, which was completely unheard of at this time. And in fact, in a 1924 book titled The Kentucky Long Rifle, Captain G.W. Dillis said, "Light in weight, graceful in line, economical in consumption of powder and lead, fatally precise, distinctly American." For 100 years, it was a model often slightly varied, but never radically changed. That was in 1924. So I have a visual aid of the rifle here. As you can see, it has a much shorter barrel than guns that were used in the past. What you can't see is the rifling inside the barrel, but that is another big part of its design that had a big effect. So this rifle was mainly used in the Revolutionary War. It saw some use in the Civil War, and it was really significant because it allowed soldiers to shoot at much farther distances, which of course had a very big impact on the outcome of the war because it now empowered them to be much more effective. Now the next rifle from this era is the Brown Bess flintlock musket. It was originally invented in 1722. It didn't really have one single creator, and it was more of an adaptation of past versions of muskets. This rifle didn't have the short barrel or the rifle barrel that the Kentucky Long Rifle had, so it wasn't as useful and effective. However, it still had big effects. It still saw a lot of use in the Revolutionary War because it was kind of like the duty rifle of the time and is what most people had to fight with, which of course had a big outcome on the effect of the war. So next, I'm going to talk about the 1800s. So first off, the Colt Navy revolver. This was invented in 1851 by one of the most famous gun makers of all time, Samuel Colt. So this gun, what it was is it was a revolver, meaning it was a much smaller gun. It was a handgun, and it had a rotating cylinder where you could preload 6 shots into the cylinders, and then you now had those 6 shots available for you whenever you needed them. And so this was really significant because it gave soldiers a second line of defense if they didn't have their main rifle. And so as for its use in war, it was mainly used in the Civil War by both sides, by both the Union and Confederacy. And it really changed warfare because now soldiers had a secondary gun they could turn to that was actually reliable and effective, unlike the ones in the past. It also had a lot of impact on the Wild West, which of course is a big part of American history. Now the next rifle from this time is the Henry repeating rifle. It was invented by Benjamin Tyler Henry in 1860, and it's arguably one of the most revolutionary rifles ever invented. What this rifle did is that it allowed people or whoever was using it to have 16 rounds of pre-made 44 rimfire ammo in the gun already ready, and it allowed them to simply work a lever to unload the spec casing and to reload a new casing. So I can demonstrate that here with this visual aid. As you can see, it has the lever right there. Push it forward, it ejects, bring it back, and it loads a new one in. It has the tube to carry up to 16 rounds. And so this was mainly used in the Civil War near the end, and it had a big impact because the Union soldiers mainly had it, and it allowed them to be much more effective in taking down the Confederacy, which had a big impact on the outcome of the war. And in fact, according to an article titled "Rifles of the Civil War and the Frontier," Confederate Colonel John Mosby famously said, "It's a rifle you could load on Sunday and shoot all week long." He said that in 1860, which of course helps represent how impactful the gun was and how effective it was. So lastly and thirdly, I'm going to talk about the 1900s. So for the first gun here is the the Colt 1911. It was originally introduced in 1911. It was adopted by the military in that same year. It shot the 45 ACP cartridge, and the significance of this handgun is that it had magazines where you could preload 7 rounds and simply put it into the gun. And it also was semi-automatic, meaning it would load itself after each time the trigger was pulled, which was a very impactful, of course, on the war, and it gave soldiers a next line defense, kind of like the Colt Navy revolver. It was mostly used in World War I, World War II, Korean War, and the Vietnam War, and it now, like I said earlier, allowed soldiers to have that second line defense in case they lost their main rifle. Now, the next gun I'm going to talk about is the M1 Garand, which was invented by John Garand in 1932. It was an extremely reliable and efficient rifle. It was semi-automatic and chambered in the 30-06 cartridge, which is a very big and powerful cartridge. And so why this is important is because it now allowed soldiers to shoot big, far distances with a semi-automatic rifle that was shooting the big bullet. So now they could be really effective and very fast with the gun. And so that's the next visual aid here. This is the M1 Garand. You can see it has the charging handle right there, which every time the trigger was pulled would go back and load a new round in, allowing soldiers to be very effective. This was used in both World War II and the Korean War, but it had its biggest impacts in World War II, and over 5 million of these rifles were produced for use in this war. And so, it was actually really beloved by most soldiers, and according to an article written by High Caliber History, Lieutenant General George S. Patton Jr. wrote, "In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised." And he said that in 1945, and that just goes to show how impactful it was. So, in summary, I've talked about the 1700s, the 1800s, and the 1900s. And again, hunting, self-defense, war, revolt, liberty, freedom. If it were not for the guns used along the way, America would not be where it is today.